So, our economy is growing. That's what we've been told by the government. There's a lot that's happened in the economy in the recovery post COVID-19. And that's why the principal secretary in the National Treasury and Planning, the State Department for Planning, is here with us. Bwana Saitoti, Torome, welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Asante sana.
That's the hot seat. And in fact, we like it when you have government there on the hot seat because, government is always about dealing with fire, That is the work of government. Either lighting up fires to warm up people's homes, light a fire so that people can have something to eat, put out fires when they become too dangerous. So it's a hot seat. Well, we've told you that we are going to explain why we are still in March. It's because there are several things that are still supposed to happen before we go to the end of March. Okay? And this is coming from, the plans that the government has in place. And because you're the man in charge of planning. Number one, there is the plan and the promise to lower the cost of electricity by a whopping 33%. First batch was done in early January, 15%. Second bit, 15%, was to happen by the end of the first quarter. We have not seen that second bit. So we are not at the end of the first quarter. We are not in a hurry. Well, that's why we are not in a hurry to close the quarter. Then there's a launching of the various infrastructure projects, specifically the expressway, and then the section between the Machakos turnoff into Kitengela turnoff, the other section between ABC Place and the Maimahiu turnoff at Rironi. Those ones, the president himself said, he's been told by the people who are working on this that March, they will be done. And he's looking forward to unveiling them, while at the same time, he then now launches a new project, which will be implemented into the next administration of the road between the Mau Summit, Rironi, from Rironi to Mau Summit.
Yes.
So we are not yet moving into April because, we're giving the government time. What's the plan? Bwana Planning PS.
Just as you know,
Yes.
in Kenya we plan through Vision 2030.
Yeah.
That is the national plan. That is the national blueprint. And then within the Vision 2030, we normally have what we call the medium-term plan. The first one was from 2008 to 2012. That we had the second medium-term plan from 2013 to 2017. Then currently we are having the third medium-term plan, which runs from 2018 to 2022. So it's coming to an end this year. But we have also started the process of preparing the fourth medium-term plan, which is actually the second last one, which will guide us from 2023 to 2027. And then from 2027 to 2030, we shall have a short medium-term plan. Then before we reach 2030, we shall be having a discussion on which will be our next long-term development plan. And for sure, what I can say, we have seen a lot of development in our country, particularly infrastructural development. And this has mainly due to the government commitment in implementing the plan. What we normally say, there was a time when Kenya was known to be very good in planning. Other countries will come, they will see our plans, then they benchmark, then they go and implement, then they bypass us. But I think we have seen a lot of difference, especially from 2003, when the late President Kibaki took over. So there was a lot of emphasis, not only in planning, but in making sure that the plans are implemented. And that's why, for example, we have, the SGR, we have a lot of roads have been constructed, then we have a lot of development in the ICT sector, where the mobile phones are very many. Even the area where it was very difficult to reach, they are now reachable. Like last month when we were doing county consultation for the MTP4, it was a surprise to drive all the way up to Maralal. No problem. The roads are good.
No pothole.
No pothole.
You were on the tarmac road.
We were on the tarmac road all the way for Maralal. And then there has been a lot of expansion. If it is, for example, the airports, we have we have quite a number of airports, international one. Then we have a lot of, even a lot of reforms in agriculture. All this is because, unlike there before, when we used to plan, but we are not very serious with the implementation, in our days, things have to be implemented through performance contracting. And also we monitor. We actually do a lot of monitoring and evaluation on the plans that are being implemented. Then we talk about the big four. They are always monitored. There is always quarterly report on the implementation of those. So there has been a lot of, and that's why we have seen our country making a lot of progress with regard to infrastructure, education, is because we are keen in implementing what is in the plan.
Okay, that's interesting that you say that, Bonapias. You've talked about using 2030 as the benchmark plan for everything, all of this being delivered, all of these infrastructure development being delivered through the Vision 2030, which essentially is a plan, a huge plan on its own. And then there's the MTPs that come, in succession throughout this time. In terms of percent, so what is the percentage of plan implementation in the country from the onset of Vision 2030 until where we are now?
It's high, okay. We cannot provide a specific number, but what normally happens is that most of the plans are actually implemented, because we try to look at, if for example, because I have talked about 4 medium-term plans. Now this is the fourth one. We are coming up with the fourth one. We have at least implemented 3. And if you look at the way we have actually implemented them, sometimes when we fail to implement a certain project, it is carried over to the next planning implementation stage. And that is how we progressively go on in implementing them. So we can say, in fact, we can say we actually implement almost 80% of what is in those projects.
Really? So would you say then, what is your satisfactory index then? How satisfied are you that the plans that have been set out then are being implemented in the country?
There is a very high rate of satisfaction, because you know there are some things that people see, they can see, they can feel them.
Yes.
So that is the satisfaction index. People can feel them, they can see them. For example, there was a time when to go to Mombasa, it was only through either road or air. But nowadays there is the SGR, which is very comfortable, a very good thing.
And the road is smooth.
And the road is smooth.
And there's a time when the road to Mombasa was not smooth all the way.
Leave alone that. There was a time, even the roads here in industrial area were in a very pathetic situation.
Actually, let's just be holistic about it. The roads in Nairobi were no roads. That is true. You navigated to avoid the road, even as you're traveling by car. Yes.
Yeah, and then you'd also find there are very many things that when we talk about implementation of plans, and when you talk about Vision 2030, many people focus on the infrastructure side. But there were several areas, there were several pillars that were going in Vision 2030. There's a socio-economic political side. Politically, there has been some reform. Yes, we have a new constitution. We have a new devolved system of government. We have all these things. On the other side, socially and all, there are things that have happened. But when I hear you say that, there's almost an 80% success rate of the implementation of Vision 2030, I'm hearing you basically saying that by the time we get into 2030, the whole idea of moving Kenya into a medium economy, industrialized country will actually be realized. Is that reality? That by 2030, this country will be a medium income industrialized country?
Yes.
In the next 7 years or so?
Yes, it will be possible because, let me give you an example. When we started Vision 2013 in 2008, we were actually a low-income country. But when we did the rebasing in 2014, and rebasing is done by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, whereby a lot of data is collected, and they look at how the income of the country has changed. In 2014, when we did the rebasing, Kenya now jumped from being a low-income country to a lower middle income. So we have already attained lower middle income
status
by 2014. Although that one now has got its own consequences. When we now become a lower middle income, we are no longer treated like a least developed country. We are treated like a country that is actually strong, and sometimes even we are even subjected to commercial loans. We now get a lot of grants for poor countries. So we attained that in 2014. So as we lay now the foundation, particularly infrastructural development, social development, we are hopeful that by 2030 we shall be a middle income country. And one of the ways in which we can actually become a middle income country is emphasizing on things like manufacturing. And that is why His Excellency the President has come up with the big four. Those big four, that is food security, which will focus more on agriculture. Then we talk about manufacturing, and then we talk about housing, and then we talk about universal healthcare. If the big four agenda is implemented to the letter, it will have a lot of impact on our economy, and by 2030 we shall be a middle income economy.
Already we have seen what appears that the big four agenda, we have fallen short. We have fallen short in the targets of housing. We have fallen short on the proper implementation of UHC. We have fallen short on food security programs, and we have plans in place, we have policies in place, but in terms of implementation of them, we are coming to the end of the administration. We have fallen short. In terms of industrialization, again, we have fallen short despite moving. But so if already this big four, we have not hit 60% of implementation of the big four, I still want to ask you the question. In 7 years' time, can we really be a middle income industrialized country?
Yes, it can be possible, because if you look at the economic survey that we launched the other day, one of the areas where we recorded a very positive growth rate was actually in the manufacturing, where manufacturing grew by 6.9%. And its contribution to the GDP, it has been lower, but now it is about 7.5%. So the government has come up with a lot of efforts. First of all, when we develop infrastructure, including increasing the energy, and also coming up with infrastructure, reviving the old railway line, coming up with new industry, then we have the special economic zone. All those are actually meant to attract manufacturers, either from within or from outside, so that we can actually increase, or we can actually increase the contribution of manufacturing to the GDP. And really, this will have a lot of impact, particularly on employment. Unemployment is a problem in many countries, but when we insist more on those special economic zone, like the one that we have in Naivasha, then there is the Dagokundu in Mombasa, then we have the EPZ will also be expanded. So all those, when they are implemented, we definitely believe that Kenya will become a newly industrial country. And then when it comes to healthcare, I think we have made quite a number of progress. And one of the reasons why we have actually focused more on universal healthcare, because of what happened in 2020 about the corona. There were very few counties even which had things like
HDUs.
HDU and ICU beds. And machine and even dialysis. I think the government has actually implemented a lot in that area, and that one has got a lot of implication, because when we have got very good healthcare in the region, that one will not be only catering for Kenyans, but even the people within the the East Africa and Africa at large. They will be coming here for medical services. So all those efforts, they are actually being implemented. They are being taken very seriously, so that to take this country to the next level of middle income.
I have to stay on the implementation of these plans. Let's just take housing as an example. I mean, we had a conversation in the previous hour, and if we're saying that the plan was 500,000 units to be delivered by the end of this current administration, and that's we're talking about July this year, end of July, beginning of August, that should have been delivered. We're looking at 1,100 that have been so far delivered. 498,000 are yet to be delivered, and this was on the plan. So my question is then, if we have such a huge deficit on the plan, how can we then say, and this is just one example, how can we then say that the country's plan is being implemented and implemented well to 80% when we have such huge deficits there? For example, I'll give you another one. Talk about food security and saying that by a certain time, we should make sure that food sources are sustainable and secure, that people are not malnourished in the country, and that they're getting adequate sources of food and nourishment across board. But we have 23 counties today, some in the alert phase, some in the alarm phase of famine, of drought. How can we then say that plans are being implemented to 80% to make sure that we are getting to a medium industrialized nation in the next 7 years if we're having such glaring gaps today?
You see, first of all, to start on the first point that you raised about housing, what we know is that, or what should happen is that the work of the government is to make it easier for the private sector to do housing. And that's why we are coming up with policies to try and make it easier for the private sector, even to give mortgage at an affordable rate, and then even for individuals themselves also to be able to construct their own houses. So the work of the government is to make it easier for that, so that affordable housing can be attained. And also, the other thing that goes hand in hand with the affordable housing is to address the informal settlement in the urban area. So all those things are being addressed. And when it comes to housing, there are other factors which come in, like the ownership of land. So that's why, for example, the government is also doing reform in the land sector, so whereby digitization, so that when now you have your own land, you can be able to plan how to put up your own house, because the government definitely cannot put a house for you, but it will make it easier for you to put your own house. So that is the work of it, is to facilitate the private sector and individuals to have their own houses. The moment the government makes things easier like that, then people definitely
you spur the growth.
Yeah, and then apart from that, the government also encourages saving, because it is from the saving where people actually construct their own houses, either from a SACCO, either from a bank. You are able to get an affordable credit. So that's what the government is actually doing. It is to facilitate the private sector. When it comes to the food security, yes, there has been challenges, and some of these challenges are actually natural, like the drought and the like. But the government will also emphasize on issues like irrigation and also other areas, and also value addition in our agricultural sector. So that's what we are actually trying to do. And also, we also know that there has been this issue of climate change, whereby the weather has become very unpredictable, that will actually affect agriculture. But we are also trying to see how can we come up with the crops that can actually be able to resist the drought. That's why we are coming with the climate smart agriculture and what have you. So that is what, and also the government is also another area that is very important, and where the government is actually putting a lot of emphasis is the construction of the dams, because so that water can be available for irrigation, so that we don't rely so much on rain-fed agriculture.
Bwana PS, when I listen to you and, you talking about the various things that the government has been doing in the last 4 years, I can see them. I can hear, because I can also see, yes, we were talking about this earlier, the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, all right, it's in place. We have talked about the digitization of the land records. Farida Karone, the CS for Lands, has been here. We've talked about, all right, so now it's also making it easier we've talked about the rolling out of title deeds. Yes, this government has given out more title deeds than any other government previously. That's not an issue. The problem, and I'll tell you, it's not just in this room, even Parliament has fingered this out as a problem, is that we have a Big Four agenda that is being presented to the country without implementation matrices and milestones. We don't know what you plan to do by the end of this year. All we know is that every time your ministry goes to Parliament, it asks for money for budget, and it says, our focus, Big Four. Our focus, Big Four. Parliament has said very many times, as they review your budget policy statement, the report of the planning of the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly over the last 4 years have been singling out this issue. We are funding a Big Four agenda, but we don't have a benchmark against which we are judging the implementation of the Big Four agenda. There are no milestones. We did not know that, what we needed to do first was to reform land so we can and reform and create financial incentives and mechanisms for people to access funding to put up houses and funding to buy houses. We did not know that. It's not there on, there's no dashboard against which we can look and say, yes, this is where we should be, and this is where we are heading to next. Why is that? I mean, this is planning. One of the things that KNBS and other honchos in planning do is they plan, they put up implementation matrices, they have monitoring and evaluation, they have milestones. How come that is not communicated to the public?
No, those milestones are actually there even in the Big Four, because one of the things that we have actually been doing, there is what we call the enablers and the drivers. And just as I have put it very clearly, like one of the enablers for housing is actually dealing with the land issues. So we have that because we know if it is, for example, agriculture, we have the enablers. The enablers are like, if we talk about irrigation, we have so all those plans are there on what is supposed to be done for certain milestone to be achieved. We have various players. So all those players, they are actually been working together so that we remove the obstacles which make it impossible for certain things to be implemented. So those actually plans are actually there on what should be done and what should come first before something else come. So all those plans are very well coordinated in the government.
Why are they not presented to Parliament? When the Parliamentary Budget Office says we don't know what we are implementing so far, why don't you respond to Parliamentary Budget Office?
Now we do that because when we go and present our budget, we actually present the money that is going to be allocated to each and every state department and the parastatal within the state department, and then there is actually a linkage because we say that this one must be done before this one happens. So these things are very, very synchronized in the government. Not that they are not synchronized, they are actually very well synchronized.
Okay.
And we have even been meeting at the PSS, then we look at what are the obstacles. For example, if a hospital was to be constructed somewhere, what must be there? For example, you find that a building like this has been constructed for a hospital. So then we look at which other sectors are supposed to come in to enable that hospital now work. There must be water. So the PS in charge of water knows what is supposed to do in that particular area. If it is because a hospital cannot operate without electricity, we make sure that power is actually in that particular electricity. And then we look at even other factors. So we have even been going around the project, then we look at what is supposed to be done. Like there was time we went to Coast, And then we looked at all what was actually happening. Like even we went to another university that was being constructed in Kwale. So we actually found that it requires a police station. So all these things are very well coordinated in the government, because in the government nowadays we actually work as a team, because we know what makes it possible for a project to be implemented. We bring all the players together and then they deliver.
Let's take a break and then we continue the conversation. 26 minutes to 9. This is the Situation Room on SpiceFM, on KTN Home. Also live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. Saitoti Torome, Principal Secretary in the Ministry of National Treasury and Planning. He's actually the PS in charge of planning in the country. He's here with us. We're talking about the economy and the economic growth and the development of the country. They just released the Economic Survey 2021, the economy and how it performed in 2021. That's what we'll be talking about in the second half of the show.
This is the Situation Room.
Principal Secretary is still here with us, Saitoti Torome, PS for Planning, being hosted by Eric Latif, Nduoko, and CT Muga.
On a PS,
Yes.
if I was looking for a negotiator for my son's wedding, I would definitely call you, because one of the things that I've heard you do well, you outline the things that the government does quietly, methodically, clearly. Why we ask these many questions is this. It begins with us asking, does this ministry have a communications department? Because this information, it may be stated once. We are going to be discussing the survey. It's stated once. But thereafter, the breakdown that enables people to internalize is that it's part of their day-to-day thinking and understanding isn't there. So apart from something like the expressway, which you have no choice but to see if you're in Nairobi where we are, so you see it, so you know it. The government doesn't do a very good job of telling people the things it does, because it does many things and it does many things well, but people have no idea whatsoever. Now, I am told it's us in the media who have a tendency of just picking up the things the government has not done. I accept we do. But we also talk about the things that the government has done. But should the government not engage its citizens more? Because this project is actually intended for the citizens anyway. Should the citizens not know more about this thing that their government is actually doing for them?
Okay, we have communication. In every state department there is a communication officers, and we actually do communicate, because sometimes not that we don't communicate at all, we actually communicate, because even sometimes even we as the PSs, we even go out in the field to inspect the implementation of the government project, and that one is very well covered by the media. We actually are accompanied by the media, then we tell them this is the project. For example, this road is being constructed, these are the challenges, and we actually do communicate. We even come up with publications on what the government has achieved. So we actually do communicate. And as it goes, or as the saying goes, it is always, if a dog bites a man, that is not news, but when a man bites the dog, that is news. So you always see, even sometimes when I listen to the radio when I am coming in the morning, you find they are only talking about small things. If it is in Kiswahili, unasikia ati kuna bwana alichapa bibi yake akakufa, such kind of things. But they are very good things that actually happen. We got to commission these things. And also the other beauty about Kenya currently is that whatever we do, even when we are planning, like now when we were now, just as I said, we are in the process of coming up with the fourth MTP. All the PSs, we went to all the counties where wananchi were giving their views. They were telling us what they want to be included in the coming MTP4, and also what they would like even their counties to put as their plan. So there is a lot of interaction, and the people are happy, they are open, and they even tell you the challenges that they have in their counties and the solution. So there is a lot of interaction with the people, and then we actually encourage them, and we actually ensure them that whatever they tell us is going to be considered and it is going to be part of the MTP4. So there is a lot of engagement. And all these things are actually covered by the
media.
By the media. Like me, I went to Kajiado, then I went to Isiolo, and then I went to Samburu. So we interacted a lot with the media on those things. So they are good things that the government does, and we try as much as possible to communicate with the people.
Okay. P.S. Last year, the economy grew by 7.5%.
Yes.
When that news came out, of course, as you would expect, the reaction was, where was it growing? Others were asking, kwani mimi naishi nchi ingine? Because they say, how come it's not translating to people's pockets? That the pain is what has grown in people's pockets. Cost of living is getting out of hand for very many people, and yet the economy is growing. How do you explain that?
You see, one thing, when you are calculating the GDP growth rate, you consider various factors. But the growth of the GDP is not something. The benefit of the growth of the GDP actually don't come up very immediate. Like, I can give an example. The government is spending a lot of money putting infrastructure, but the benefit will take a bit of time before they are realized. And for sure, what we know is that if you compare, we know that during the late Kibaki's time, there was a lot of infrastructural development. The current government has also even bypassed what was done during Kibaki's time. But the reason why now life is slightly better in Kenya is because of the effort which was done during Kibaki's time. And whatever now the government is currently doing, development of infrastructure, coming up with investing a lot on health services and what have you, those benefits will be felt later on. So the spring, it takes a bit of time, because I can explain one of the economic theories between economic growth and economic development. Economic growth is where you record very high growth rate in the GDP. But now the benefit of economic growth are felt in economic development, whereby you talk about employment increases, the income of the people also goes up. Things like literacy rate increases, the life expectancy improves, people have got access to clean water, people have got access to a clean environment. All those things come as a result. So whatever we are doing at the moment, it will be reflected in economic growth. Because if, for example, the government was constructing a road, a sector like the construction sector will actually record a very high economic growth. But then now, the benefit of that road now will be felt later, where now maybe, for example, we attract industries, people get jobs, their income increases. So economic growth precedes economic development.
So are we saying the kind of planning that's taking place here now is kind of like prepare for when it eventually happens kind of planning? That the infrastructure is being set up so that in the eventuality that something will happen, the basic infrastructure is there. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you want to look at other sectors then in the country, I mean, you take your pick about where it is. Do you then take in the social aspect into consideration? I mean, here it just seems like a lot of brick and mortar. We need to set up roads here. We need to do this. Do you take into consideration the social aspect, the people on the ground in the situations where we're talking about lack of infrastructure, city planning for water, the dormitory towns of Nairobi, where sewage doesn't exist, for example, and where Kitengela, for example, residents had to build with their own money 40 million shillings to now put together a sewage system. Is that taken into consideration in these plans?
It is taken into consideration a lot. Take an example like what the NMS do in Nairobi Metropolitan. You know, for the first time, there has been a lot of water problem in the informal settlements. But now the government has actually gone further to try and make sure that they even drill boreholes in some of those settlements so that at least people can have access to water. There has not been even clinics or health centers in those areas, but now we can see they are actually going there. So when it comes to planning, and also implementation, the social aspect is taken into place, and that's why we look at things like the hospitals. We make sure that is okay. We know hospitals is involved or health services is involved. So there is also a plan to build more health centers, to make sure that they have medicine. All those things. If it is the education, is also planned, because we know classrooms are constructed, and especially through the CDF. The CDF money mostly does a lot of education due to the court ruling, which said the CDF can only do things that are for the national government. The government also plans for security. That's why it opens up even things like more police stations are opened, just to make sure that there is security, and all those things are actually planned. We don't only plan about roads and railways and airports. We also plan for the social, for the social issues. Yeah, including things like the gender. They are all planned.
So, ordinarily, how long does it take for the graph of economic development to catch up with the graph of economic growth? I don't mean by catching up, but by when we say that the economy in 2021 grew by 7.5%, it's because of various factors. Okay, things that happened, the improvement of the manufacturing sector, the infrastructure that are being put in place, but the benefits will take a while to be realized. So normally, how long would it take? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? And there are factors that could, even after economic growth, are there factors that could come in that would hinder the benefits from being realized?
That one, it depends from country to country, or from an economy to an economy, because there are also other things that are non-tangible, and those are actually the most important thing. We can have roads, we can have railway lines, but the government also come up with other factors to attract the local and international investors, like favorable tax rate, things like the regulations that are actually put in place, things like addressing even issues like corruption. In other words, the government also put in what we call the ease of doing business. How possible is it, for example, if you want to set up a business, how long will you take? Even the roads are there, the railway line are there. You are able maybe to move your container from Mombasa to Nairobi within a short time because of the SGR and what have you. But how fast can you be able to set up your business? And that's why the government came up with this issue of the Huduma Center, whereby if you want government services, if you want to apply for a license, if you want to apply for the even NEMA inspection, it is in one-stop shop. So apart from infrastructure, there are also policies that the government crafts to make sure that it takes a shorter time for you to start your business. How long does it take for you maybe to register a company so that you can start now doing your business? So all those things must be addressed. Issues of taxation, tax refund, and what have you, they are all addressed, just to make sure that even when the infrastructure is there, it is even easier for somebody to come and set a business. Yeah. So depending on how the government moves very fast, then we can be able to realize more benefit.
What are some of the things, Bona PS, even as you think about that, stop? Because, I mean, yeah, you talked about implementation of these plans, but I mean, and there's also a lot that the eye can see in terms of what's really happening around the country. What would you say are some of the challenges or impediments to actually having the implementation of these things taking? What problems is the government facing today? I mean, I have an idea, but what are some of the problems they're facing to stop these things from actually coming to fruition that pose as challenges?
There are quite a number of challenges. Some of them are natural, and some of them are situational, like the climate change, where the rain pattern or the weather pattern has become very unpredictable. That will affect agricultural sector. And agriculture still contributes 22% 1.4% of the GDP. And then, of course, there are others like, we can't complain because it's democracy. And I can actually now even try to address this issue, though you have not asked it, but it is important that I mention it. Sometimes you hear even politicians out there comparing Kibaki and Uhuru. Then they say that, but one thing that we have to know is that from when we adopted the new constitution of 2010, we ended up having what we call a bloated, a big government.
Yeah.
We have the senators, we have the governors, we have we have more MPs than it used to be. Then we talk about
Devolved units.
Devolved units. Money must be taken from the national government to the county government. Then we have even a big judiciary. It never used to be as big as it is there. So definitely, with the new constitution, we have got a bloated government or a big government. But at the same time, how do we finance our development? There is taxes. We must get taxes from the people so that we can finance our operations as a government. But then, also people want development. People want roads to be constructed. They want energy to be generated. They want water in their homes. So what does the government do? Because the money that we collect from taxes is not enough to run the government and also to provide development. That is why the issue of the debt come in. So we must borrow to finance particularly infrastructure because the money that is obtained from ordinary revenue is not enough. So that's why people have been talking about debt all the time. But as long as we can be able to borrow and finance for infrastructural projects, which will have a lot of benefit in the country in the future, there is nothing wrong in that. And we are able to borrow. We are not in a crisis. And I don't think in Kenya, since we got independent in 1963, I have not heard of any time when our debts were written off. Because we are a strong economy, and when we borrow, we are able to repay. But then what we are actually trying to do to make sure that we don't rely so much on borrowing to finance our project. That's why the issue of the PPP comes, public-private partnership. And one of the great success is actually now the expressway that has been financed through the PPP. And what the government has actually done, it is actually, we started PPP around 2013. Not much progress has been done. But now the government deliberately amended the act to remove all the obstacles which were making the PPP not to work. But for now, this one is a good case, the Nairobi Expressway. And also the other one that is also being considered is now the one that you mentioned earlier about the Nairobi Mau Summit. Because you see, if you drive from Nairobi to Nakuru, that road is very dangerous. It is prone to a lot of accident. And there are a lot of traffic. Sometimes it takes you maybe 4 hours to go from Nairobi to Nakuru. So that one is actually now being considered to be financed through PPP. Because PPP, actually the basic principle of PPP is to bring in the private sector to fund the infrastructural project because of lack of what we call fiscal space. Because the government cannot continue to borrow and finance infrastructure. If there can be a way through PPP, then the better, because it will ease our burden of keep on borrowing.
So we shall pay slowly.
Yes.
It's like hire purchase.
Yes.
Okay.
And also we shall start now paying tolls on the roads because the private people who came and invested in them, they will have to recoup their investment. So that's why even in the expressway we have toll.
The problem is not that, Bona PS. I guess the problem would be in the details of the contracts, the PPP contracts, and whether there is sufficient public participation and sufficient transparency in those contracts. Because it's the same problem we're having now with the president ordering the Ministry of Energy and Kenya Power to go and review the contracts that it has signed with independent power producers. It is because of it's a contracting. What are you doing about that?
And that's why the act is amended to fast track on those issues so that we don't take so long on such issues. We fast track, we remove the red tape when it comes to issues of procurement.
Our problem usually is with the transparency of those contracts. Public money is used to help pay for whatever loans we take, or public money by way of taxes are used to repay. So what we ask for is transparency, and this is where the problem comes in. You ask questions that are never answered. You ask for documents that are never availed.
I think documents will always be available in the government when we are asked to do that.
There's
Even
a case in
by
court.
even in the most of the time they even come to ask document the ESCC. You know, we under the ministry that was under NYS and what have you. We always provide.
You always
So-
provide.
And then now there is also what we call the public participation, and which is provided in our constitution. So in that public participation make it the government to be more transparent, because we must tell the public what is happening. And even those contracts, when they are being awarded, they are put in the paper. So there is nothing the government hides.
It's
Okay.
all clear.
It's all clear.
Bona PS, we thank you very much for joining us, and we want you to come again. Saitoti Torome is the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Planning. The National Treasury and Planning is the ministry. We'll be talking about economic growth in the country, the status of Kenya's economy, and thank you for answering all our questions as well as you have done today.